What is going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 26. I am your host, Marcus, and in this episode, we are talking about being more efficient with your time. Now, this is one of those things that I've talked about on some YouTube videos, but recently I really started thinking about this because I've been lacking on some particular things that aren't ultimately priority, but things I still wanted to get done. And I really wanted to just talk about it in general, about being more efficient with your time. And for the longest time, we always wished that we'd have more time in the day. And it isn't until we actually look at our days where we see where we might actually there might be some leakage or some slippage, essentially, that we are spending more time on stuff that we shouldn't actually be spending on, or that is not a real priority in our life. And a lot of times, you may be working a job. Like for myself, I worked in construction for quite a few years before I actually became a programmer. And in doing so, I was exhausted when I came home. And the last thing I wanted to do was sit and meditate or sit and work out. Although I did work out, there was a lot of different things that I essentially pushed off. They weren't a priority for me just because I was tired. I couldn't really think straight. And it was more just go work out, to come home, do whatever I could do that didn't involve any thinking at that point. And being said, I think it's important when you're looking to make your day more efficient, right? My biggest thing is you can write lists down, you can do all these other different things, and the tools and stuff that I've always teached, they do help. But it's ultimately in developing the habits and incorporating and knowing essentially where you're trying to go in your life. And I've talked about this, about how you should have a destination in mind, because if you don't have any kind of destination, you're kind of just lost out and about. You're just letting life essentially take its course on you. And so when you are looking for that destination, you should have like quarterly goals on top of that destination. And then not only that, but have daily tasks. And so it makes it so much easier. Although it sounds like all this planning, you don't have to spend so much time planning, but understand what the daily task should be and being able to execute on it based off of priority, right? What is a priority to you? Is your health a priority to you? Is it mental or physical health? Or is it both? Are you spending the time each and every day for those things? Maybe it's learning a new skill, right? Are you spending time each and every day for those things? Maybe it's just reading, right? There's a lot of different things you can incorporate. You have to understand that you have to develop that habit, and it takes 30 days to be able to do that. And for me, what I always used to do, a good example would be like when I was in my bodybuilding phase, and when I wanted to really actually professionally compete in bodybuilding, I had to eat every 3 hours. And so being said, I wasn't hungry when I first started. After eating, I didn't want to turn around and eat every 3 hours, because it seemed like the 3-hour clock would just come around quicker than expected. And then I'd have to eat again. So I'd set my alarm on whatever it was. If I had to take a supplement at that time, or I had to eat at that time, I would do that until my body got adjusted to it. And then I eventually got adjusted to it after about 30 days, to where I didn't need to set the alarm anymore. And it just became natural. And when you're looking at, I know life happens, right? And doing a lot of these different things, it's being consistent with it. And being consistent long enough so you can build a habit that allows you to do it without actually giving it any thought, or very minimal thought. And so when you're trying to be more efficient, obviously, if you're trying to learn a skill or something, it's going to take time, right? Trial and error will ultimately help you become more efficient at whatever that task is, because you realize what works, what doesn't work, and then you essentially build your skill off of that. Right? You can read a million different books, and it's like I talk about all the time, but ultimately it's about what you put into practice. And you realize that once you start putting something into practice, that it doesn't quite work how it was explained, and that you have to make adjustments on the way. And this is where you start becoming more efficient. But if you are in that state to where you come home and you really don't want to think about it, and if it's just not working or whatever the case is, and you just put it away, right, or continue to not do it anymore, then it's going to fall off, and then you're not going to be able to stay with it. So consistency is always a big one to being more productive. And a lot of times we feel like there's some kind of secret sauce to being more productive. There's no secret sauce. It's just maintaining and auditing yourself on the priorities that you are trying to accomplish in your life. And again, if you feel like one of your major priorities isn't a priority anymore, then maybe you need to knock it down a couple pegs to what is a priority. But it is always important to find those things that are for you, right? I always talked about, you need to be first. and making sure that those priorities are based off of you, right? Because you are the foundation in which it stands. And if that foundation is weak, if it has cracks in it, right, it's not going to be good, and that foundation could break, and the whole house of cards can come falling down, right? So this is where you need to be careful and put yourself first to make sure those priorities line up to that. And being said, from that point, it helps you allow you to mold your schedule in a way that will allow you to make that possible. And then executing on those daily tasks will allow you to be more efficient. And for myself, even like if there's specific errands that I have to do, what I also only like to do is I like to bunch my errands together. I don't like to just do one errand, spend an extra 30 minutes driving somewhere, right? If I have a bunch of errands that go out into one particular area that I know I have to do a bunch of different variety of things, try to do it at that one time, right? Schedule it all together as opposed to just doing something that will pull you off. This is not saying you can always do that, but this is being more efficient and being mindful of where your time is going, because a lot of times we fall into that thing where we just want to relax, right? This is a natural instinct in us, is to, as long as we are safe, as long as we are comfortable, our body doesn't want to do anything other than that. So you are essentially going against the grain, no matter what you do. When you're trying to make improvements in your life and being more efficient, you're going against the grain. Again, your body would like you to sit on the couch and just eat all day and essentially procreate, right? That's what you're designed to do. That's all we want to do. And so, being said, you're going to have to force yourself to do things. And doing this, it allows you to build that habit of executing on things. The more you push against the grain, because a lot of times, a lot of people will say, well, I can't do it. I don't have the time. I don't this and that, right? We come up with excuses for ourselves because that is the way our body is wired. And so we just fall along with it. We're exhausted. We don't want to do it. But if you can, develop that habit of just executing on it, which is out giving it thoughts or giving it explanation on why you can't do it and just doing it, saying, hey, it's this particular time. I've talked about blocking time before, about how you should chunk your time into specific things that you want. Maybe in the morning you want to meditate. So from 5 to 6 in the morning, you meditate. From 6 to 7, maybe 6 to 6:30, maybe you read a book, right? And then you go throughout your day. And then at the end of the day, maybe from 6 to 7, maybe you work out, right? And so it's knowing those chunks of time. And what ultimately helps here is making sure that your schedule is always the same or very similar. And that's what's going to help you be efficient at a lot of different things, because you're essentially conditioning your body and your mind for these things. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. Whenever you're building a habit, you're just conditioning yourself to do that specific thing. And so when talking about this, you can apply this to anything. You can apply this to your diet. You can apply this to your workout routine. It's just being mindful of it and allowing yourself to give yourself time and allowing yourself to make it a regular habit. Once it's a regular habit, it is, again, much easier. It's not saying it's 100% effective, right? But you have a higher priority, or you have a higher margin of success when you do this, right? And realize you're going to be maintaining this. A lot of times people think that you just flip a switch or you were programmed that way and then you just do it. You get to a point to where you can, but you always have where you can do it. It's a lot easier to do it. It's not saying it's just automatic, but it makes it a lot easier because there's less thought. And so when there's less thought, there's that less noise in the background telling you why you can't do it or whatever other excuse there may be in the book. But ultimately understand this is what is going to help you. And so in doing this and being more efficient with your time, again, there's no secret. It's building that time, but ultimately auditing too, because there are many times even, I've been doing a lot of stuff on social media. So I've been like messing with TikTok and Facebook and everything. So the thing is I try to limit that time, right? It's not saying you can't have your own time to yourself. I think that is always important and extremely important for your mental health, is having that time for yourself. Now, always talk about trying to align your work with things that you thoroughly enjoy, so it really doesn't feel like work. And even for myself, I work on a lot of stock market stuff, so it takes up a lot of my time. And being said, right, I thoroughly enjoy it though, but I lose track of time, and I think sometimes I allow it to go over specific times and bleed into other things, other smaller priorities that I don't typically address, right, that I shouldn't be neglecting, and go back and audit. Okay, well, I need to make sure and be mindful of this, and then as soon as I remember it, is to execute on it and make sure that I'm doing that consistently. And again, sometimes you do very well, you're executing on all cylinders, and other times you kind of fall off. So you have to realize that it comes in waves, but you're trying to build that framework that's going to allow you to succeed. And so when you have that goal and that destination, and then you have the daily tasks all broken down, it makes it much easier, because all you know is, hey, I got to do this today. Where am I going to squeeze it in, right? If you have kids, or if you have other different things going on in your life, maybe you take Taekwondo, maybe you have to be somewhere at a specific time or a meeting or whatever the case is, that you can adjust that schedule and essentially watch where those chunks of time go and be able to cut it off when it needs to be cut off, so it doesn't leak into those other time frames. And realize that if you want to be efficient, you also have to find the motivation in it. And because motivation comes in bursts, and this is something I've talked about, there's pockets of motivation, and if you don't have those pockets of motivation, it's hard to be efficient, because you have a lack of will to do it. And if you have a lack of will, you're not going to want to do it, so you're not going to be most efficient. You're just going to go through essentially the motion to get it done. That's not saying you won't always be 100%, because you won't. Even I talk about, trying to always be your best self. Let everybody see your best self at all times. And your best self isn't always the same. It changes each and every day. Some days you're better off than other days. Some days you're a really cool cat. And other days, maybe not as much. Maybe you are sharp as a tack one day, and the next day you're just not. Right? There's a lot of things that come into play there. You can't beat yourself up for that. The thing is you're trying to be efficient as possible, so you have daily tasks, so you're trying to make it as easy as possible, because building that framework, it has to be simple. We like to introduce so much complexity with charts and diagrams and all these other things. Maybe that helps you, maybe it doesn't. For me, it's never helped me. So what I've had to do is develop habits out of essentially conditioning myself through alerts and alarms, and sitting and pondering about my day, and where I'm like being mindful of where my time is going, and realizing that I'm spending too much on social media, or perhaps I'm spending too much relaxation time when I should be actually doing something that's more productive. But all that stuff should be somewhat figured out. It's not saying it has to be so rigid that you just have no flexibility. Right? I think you should have flexibility, but you should also know what your daily plans are, so you can get to that destination. Because if you're not executing on those daily tasks, you realize that you're not going to achieve those things that you want in life. And so I've always kind of lived this way. For the most part, I've been more stricter on where my time goes now, because I'm trying to achieve other specific things. So being able to do that, I spend more time working. But even though like I've talked about, even though I do work a lot, more so I think than I've probably ever worked, but I ultimately understand I enjoy this, right? I enjoy helping people and doing Discover Ignite. I enjoy doing stock market stuff, right? These are things I thoroughly enjoy, because they align with my destination and where I want to go. And it's not saying that you have to have the destination so clearly defined, right? I think a lot of people talk about your destination has to be extremely clear. And I think mine is pretty clear to a point. It's not every specific detail, but ultimately just understand that, hey, I want to get here. I'm taking the steps that I need to take every day and execute on those every day, because I'm trying to keep my framework simple, because I know where I'm going. To be able to do that, I have to know what I'm executing on every day. And again, being adjustable, right? Okay, if something does happen today, what is my number one priority that has to get done no matter what? And maybe it's mindfulness, especially nowadays, right? You need that mental health is extremely important, because it essentially bases it's everything's based around your mental health. If you can't function correctly mentally, right, you're going to be drained. It's everything that you do isn't going to be efficient. You're not going to be able to take advantage of the time that you have, and realize that a lot more time you'll end up spending time to essentially do more like a zombie type things where there's no thought process involved. And so, being said, looking and being efficient is one of those things I've always had to check. And again, it comes in waves. The pockets of motivation is extremely important to work on specific things and get through the things that you want to in the daily by executing the daily task. And again, auditing. And the sooner you can do that, again, daily, referring back, there are many times, even during my day, that I do sit and I look over my day and see where my time is being spent and determine, okay, well, I did this tomorrow. I need to make a mental note of this and reference that tomorrow. So when this comes up, I can correct it here. This is anything that you are finding that isn't being efficient, right? Maybe it's dropping off your kids at a specific time. Is there something I could do that can make it more efficient, and tweaking to make sure that it is as efficient as possible? So again, not saying that it has to fire on every cylinder all the time. You just want to be able to win the battles, right? Or win the war. And you're going to lose some battles, but ultimately just winning the war. So being said, you always have to keep that in mind. And not to beat yourself up if you slip a little bit. The point being is you don't want that slippage to essentially being the point to where you are just completely neglecting it or procrastinating, because that is one of the biggest things when you're talking about trying to be efficient is procrastination. This is why I talk about you need to develop that habit of just executing. And when it becomes a habit, right, you eliminate thoughts, you eliminate the excuses, you just start executing on it. So you realize, oh, I got to do this. And then you have that slight hesitation as before. If it's not a habit, you'll sit there and you're thinking, you'll ponder about all the different reasons why you're not going to do it. And again, it's something you need to maintain, because something I've noticed. Even a good example is like my running. I've gone back to the gym. And so I go to the gym like pretty much every day. I do have to force myself to take a day off. But what I've noticed is since I've gone back to the gym, like my running I'm not always running. And so I've had to make a mental note, and it's like restarting, where before I used to love going out and running every day. That was something I was looking forward to, because it was the only time I was actually able to exercise. Now that I got another outlet to exercise, it's kind of like, well, doing this is like more efforts, more energy and everything. And I don't do them back to back, right? So I do them 2 different times during the day. Now, being said, and so it's even harder for me to be able to execute on that and be able to go out and run, right? So I definitely have to force myself a lot more to go running. Yes, I could be more efficient with my time, and right after the gym, as opposed to getting ready for the day and stuff like that, I can go right back into essentially running right after the fact and get everything done in one time. And that's something I've looked at, especially being in summer. It is so hot outside in the middle of the day, so to actually go running, I have to wait. It has to be either early in the morning or later in the evening. And so being said, it's going through your day and looking at those things that you can adjust and fix. And can I group stuff together? Can I eliminate something that is not necessary, is not a priority? This is why priorities is such a big deal, because you need to be able to understand that, if everything else fails, is this the number one thing that I want to get done for the day? Make sure it is the number one thing. If it's not, it can be pushed. And yes, procrastination, right? Some things can procrastinate, but if there's something that you are really trying to achieve, you need to make sure that number one thing is done, and whatever your priority list is, and knock it out. Again, especially because it's related to self first and why it really matters. And so when looking at these different things and trying to be more efficient, I think I've been more efficient than I've ever been in my life over the past couple of years. Before, as a younger guy, there were things I wanted to get done, but I was never mindful of my time. I would just let the day go, and I wouldn't try to control it and determine where my time was going. And so that's the biggest thing is being mindful of your time, being mindful of where it's going, being mindful of, okay, well, now I know I need to do these specific tasks because this is what I'm trying to get done, and realize that from this point, I can't allow myself to just wander and drift off and do whatever. Now, I do think it's important to have that time where you do that. Again, it does work for mental health, major, and even in doing so, I think it's important to incorporate other things. And I talked about many times before how, you to be more efficient, like you want to learn about something specifically, but you're running all over the place, right? Why not listen to an audiobook, listen to a podcast while you're in the car? So every time you pop in the car, you're just automatically throwing on the podcast or throwing on the book and learning, because that is the only time. And for me, for the longest time, I used to do that, especially when I first came into programming. That's all I used to do is listen to podcasts and books when I was driving, because I had about an hour drive each way to work every day. I was like, man, I'm wasting so much time. What can I be doing in the car essentially to help me improve my time, right? Be efficient. And since I drove for so long, 2 hours a day is a lot, right? If I could spend 2 hours in a classroom, I could expand my knowledge, and I could do a lot of different things and be more productive in just doing that. And so I started doing that, and I learned a ton by doing that, able to actually come in and teach other people about the stuff I was learning, because I was expanding that knowledge and understanding that your knowledge base is going to have to expand, right? To be more efficient at things. A lot of times we're only good with the tools that we have, and there are a lot of things that we don't know about. And so, being said, I don't think it's not in our benefit to just ignore things and not try to educate ourselves about specific things, especially if we have a destination in mind, and try to understand it better by diving deeper and realize that education doesn't just stop at high school or college or whatever the case is, but that you have to continue to learn and expand on the things that you want to bring into your life, right? Whatever your passion is, right? What more can you learn about that? Because a lot of times you may think you know a lot about something specifically, but you come across something, if you are, being curious and trying to expand, whatever it is that you are trying to learn about, you come across other things and other perspectives that open your mind and thoughts and ideas to other avenues. And this helps you become more efficient as well, because you're not looking at it one-dimensional. It's also something I talk about all the time about being multidimensional, because if you're multidimensional, you can solve problems a lot quicker because you have essentially a different taste of different variety of things. And that helps you solve problems much quicker. And Leonardo Da Vinci did this many times. And I've also referenced him about this many times, because he did different things, right? He did arts, he did science, he did a multitude of different things, right? He was a mechanic. He did all different kinds of things that allowed him to get different perspective on things. And being effective, you can go really deep on something, but I've always noticed that people that I've run across that are really intelligent or smart about something specific, which can be extremely beneficial for that specific thing. But being said, when it comes to other problems, right, they tend to struggle. Where someone that may have the multiple dimensions or multiple perspective, they can look at it and easily solve that particular problem because of the different perspectives that they have. And so that is what matters and allows you to be more efficient in going through your life and finding processes that are perhaps lagging and things that you can fix or remove ultimately, right? You want to always keep the framework of being efficient very simple, very clean. We don't want to congest it with a bunch of things that aren't really aligned to our destination. Now, and again, I do agree that, you do have to have things in your life where you're relaxing and not always thinking those things are important. But when you have priorities, you need to also understand that time is one of the things that we don't get back. So you really want to be mindful of where you're spending that time, right? This is the currency to life is your time. And if you are just randomly throwing out your currency everywhere, right, just giving it in abundance and not getting something in return, some kind of ROI on that time that you're spending, you realize that you're just spending, and realize that at one point you're going to get in your life to where you look back and you said, man, where did I spend all my money, right? Where did I spend all my currency? Where did it all go? And you don't want that to be you. So what you want to do is be mindful and check these things and keep them in check and make sure that they're aligning. again, for myself, right? I feel like a lot of my younger years, right? Like I was still productive. I think by normal circumstances, it was very productive, right? I went back to college, my older years, but in my younger years, I went to military and I got a skill, right? And I went through technical school, and then I did some schooling along the way. I learned some other different things along the way. And again, was a tradesman, so I was learning that along the way. I didn't really do much aside from that. And realizing that in doing so, right, I missed out on a lot of things. There was a lot of opportunities I wish I would have capitalized on because I had the resources at the time. I showed interest, but I never followed up. And that's one of the biggest things is I made up for a lot of it when I got older. Like I said, I went back to college and I started doing all these other things and expanding my horizons and trying to be more efficient, right? And realizing that's what I needed to do was keep it simple, right? Not chase the things that you really don't need. And I talk about minimalism and stuff like that, and realizing when you're spending your time and trying to be efficient with your time, and knowing that you only got so much time, right? You only got a handful of times. If you're an adult, you'll see your parents again in your life, unless you live really close. You only got a handful of times you might see your siblings or particular people in your life. And so it's important to make sure, again, that currency is spent where you want it to be spent. And looking back at my life and how I essentially, quote unquote, could have wasted my younger years, I try to make sure that the time I spend now is spent on a good, high quality things that are going to leverage me to where I want to get, leverage me to be able to relax earlier, and know that, yes, there's a lot of work up front, but realize that being efficient is about knowing where you're going and realizing that your time is important, and you should be mindful of that, and you should be greedy of that time. That is your time. And this is where it comes back to self first. And realizing self first, that currency needs to be spent on yourself. If you have a solid frame, you can help support those others that need that help in knowing where their currency is being spent each and every day. So on something they want, or something they're enjoying in life. Life shouldn't be about just work. Life shouldn't be about just having fun either, right? There should be a good combination of both. Do I agree in balance? I know balance is a whole other conversation, but ultimately understand that, you should have some sort of balance where you're happy, but being productive. And being that way, again, you have to know where that time is being spent, where your currency is being spent. And making sure that the daily tasks line up with that purpose, that destination that you want to achieve, and knowing when you're spending some currency that it's being wasted, right? You may come across relationships or a job or a situation in your life where that time is just wasted time, and you need to know that, and the sooner you can correct that, the better. Again, because we're only given so much time, and how much I think it's as important that you enjoy the time with the people you're with. And those people are just sucking your time away and the ROI isn't there, you need to make an adjustment and remove those things in your life. Job, relationships, whatever the circumstance is, know where you're spending your time. That is what's important. That's what's going to make you more efficient in life. It's not just about do this schedule and get this done and how can I save time? How or do you want to spend your currency in this lifetime is really what it matters. At that point, you can be more productive because it goes deeper than just some surface level, write stuff down in a notebook and abide by these particular tasks. It's about knowing where your currency is going.